A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Burke. Great resume or profile, and research shows that you've done quite a lot in your years. What brought you to Ghana?
Well, thanks for having me, and good day, Ghana. Well, many things. My son was getting married in Ghana, so I decided if I'm coming, I'm going to do many things. Okay. So I reached out to persons. One of them was Nana, but I also reached out to some friends who belong to the MPC royal family. So the main thing was to get my son see his, the customs and all of that. It itself was an educational exercise, right? And that went well, but that was the Sunday after I arrived. So I've been here for 10 days after that. Okay. So we are good, been in a number of places and learning about Ghana. You read about it, you have to come here to feel it, to start to just barely understand it. And I've seen you have kept some of the best African traditions and best practices, which I'm pleased about, that you're not totally westernized.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's nice to know we haven't totally become westernized. A number of people I have interacted with who have come from Jamaica always point to places across the city and say, this reminds me of Kingston, this reminds me of this place. Was that the same feeling you had when you arrived?
I kept saying that you have taken all our plants from Jamaica and planted them in Ghana. And Nana tells me it's the other way around. But I look at the plants, and it's 95% what we see in Jamaica, right? I feel the warmth of the people, right? All of that. There are just so many similarities. There are some glaring differences, of course. You're on the African continent, and we are in the Caribbean. Small islands compared to the size of Ghana, different mentality, but there are some real similarities between Jamaica and Ghana.
You know, it's quite interesting you refer to Jamaica. I mean, in literal sense of its size, it's a small country. But when you refer to Jamaica, Jamaica is recognizable anywhere in the world. For a lot of people, it could be because of the exploits in track and field, or maybe because you've got some great beaches. And of course, we can't sidestep the very icon and legend Bob Marley. So small thing or big things come from small places. That said, we have a shared heritage, albeit under very not so great circumstances, but it is what it is. We're here now. We need to forge ahead. In your estimation, how do we explore taking this heritage beyond 1998 when we started the Emancipation Day celebration in Ghana, and the late President Rawlins, pretty much did a tour. I think he visited Jamaica and said, you know what, Ghana is open, it's your home, come through. It's been a few good years now. How do we take this to the next level?
I want to say very quickly, I'm amazed at the number of Jamaicans who are living in Ghana, calling it home. That is number one. Two, virtual technology and technology has really brought us closer, right? There is no doubt that the majority of people in Jamaica came from this region, Ghana. That is indisputable. So, and we have always known that this is where most of us came from. But in Jamaica, we are mixed. There are no tribes like that anymore, intermarriage over the years. So the Jamaican people relate to Ghana particularly. I think the three countries relate most to, for whatever reasons, are South Africa, to Ghana and Nigeria. Those are where the focus is, right? Ghana being the smallest of them, but still noteworthy. And because of that history, particularly with the progressives of Kwame Nkrumah and his whole push for Pan-Africanism, his reading of Marcus Garvey, but the work he did in Pan-Africanism, for those of us who are children of the 60s and 70s, we have a great respect for Kwame Nkrumah. right?
And you in particular have a lot of respect because you've named your children. One of your children is named Kwame.
Kwame.
That's
Sekou
right.
Kwame.
Sekou and Kwame. So you at least have two names related to.
That is just one. One has the name Sekou Kwame.
Also Sekou Kwame.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's wonderful.
Couldn't leave Sekou Tora out of it.
Absolutely. Well, in fact, Nkrumah named one of his sons Sekou. After
That
Sekou
I did
Touré.
not know.
Yeah, he has a son named Sekou Nkrumah. But be that as it may, we have a lot to learn from Jamaica, albeit a small country. You're dominating track and field. You're top 5, if I'm not guesstimating fabulously incorrectly. That if we talk tourism, I mean, Jamaica is one of the hottest destinations. You've harnessed your industry well. You've harnessed your arts and culture. You're exporting music to the rest of the world. You're affecting the cultures around the world. How can Ghana learn something from you?
Well, we have some similarities, right? A lot of our economy is foreign dominated. And of course you need foreign capital, foreign technology, but you have to balance it. I understand without interfering, a lot of your economy is foreign dominated. So we both have to see how we make our own citizens become more empowered in our country. That's number one. Number two, as countries develop, we have to be careful that we're not leaving too much of our population behind economically and socially. And that is happening in Jamaica. It's happening in many societies. And again, without interfering, I see that disparity also in Ghana. So some people have done well. There is a growing middle class, growing professional class, but there's that thing called rural poor and urban poor, and that exists in Jamaica. I think many African societies who started off dispossessed mentally from colonialism, economically from colonialism, really have to have an anti-post-colonial development plan. How do we bring those of our citizens who have been left behind, too many of them, to get a good educational exposure, that they can recognize their ambitions? I'm sure we can agree that in both Ghana and in Jamaica, if more of our people were to access good quality, affordable education at the tertiary level, both of our countries were better developed.
True.
Right? And development, I'm not talking about tall buildings and roads, although those things are important. I'm talking about the people of our country, building and fashioning the society that we want. And we spoke about the virtual technology. It comes with good and bad, as you know.
True.
It comes with the good and bad Western influences. And sometimes too much of our people hold on to the bad Western influences and discard our own influences. So in Jamaica, for example, many people were made to feel ashamed because they spoke Patois, which was part of the indigenous tongue brought from Africa mixed with English. There was the whole question of color complexion, and it is still there. It had diminished during the 70s under Michael Manley, when all of us knew, regardless of our complexion, we were black people, we were African descent. So there's this color thing still in the society. Unfortunately, some of our men like lighter shade women, right? That we're still not, we talk about we're black, but we don't have that same pride and thing about being black, being Africans. Many people in Jamaica will say, oh, we are Jamaicans, not Africans, right? So there's a whole disconnect with our heritage, our culture, our ancestry. But we could talk the whole day about that.
Absolutely.
These are some of the contradictions left by colonialism and not having a proper national education plan and program for our people. And I think we can learn, both countries can share experiences and learn.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. And contradictions aside, there is a clear and an evident appetite for both countries to connect, interact, and learn from each other. How well can we take advantage of this crest of the wave and make sure that, we can, however late Marcus Garvey's idea of the Black Star Line, bringing, diasporans to the continent and vice versa, how do we bring Ghana and Jamaica together and have people come and go?
So there are some people I met, for example, Donneray. They are working on projects and programs. I don't intend to duplicate. I intend to give them all the support I can mobilize in Jamaica. So, and again, when I say we, I am the smaller part of the we. How we do friendship tours to Ghana and vice versa, Ghanaians come to Jamaica, because you have a more powerful overall economy than Jamaica. You have more people that can fill a flight. I mean, Accra alone is Jamaica's population, right? I mean, I know Accra's a big city, but coming here, I'm amazed at your traffic jams and I'm amazed at the development of the city. So there are enough Ghanaians who can, whether it starts as a quarterly trip and then develop to a monthly, then bi-monthly. Maybe 2 years from now or 3 years, we have direct flights. Maybe before that, if the economy, if the business is sound. So there needs to be that engagement.
Right.
I think it's more than possible. I'm quite optimistic about it.
Borrowing from your experience as an entrepreneur who has a wide range of interests, including tourism in the grill.
A very small hotel.
Well,
a very small, let me not overdo it.
But I'm sure that you have learned a thing or two about how the tourism ecosystem works. Borrowing from the pedigree of Jamaica as a whole and your own personal experience, what do you see the low-hanging fruits for Ghana?
Okay, so first of all, Ghana has a wide range of culture. I'm just learning about the different tribes, etc. You could spend 6 months in Ghana and just learning the tip of it, right? I think people want to reconnect with their ancestry, where they came from. I understand that you have the historical sites. Some of them are being restored. I went to Fort Amsterdam, right, on the Cape Coast. I was concerned about how it had been allowed to deteriorate. I hear UNESCO and a Ghanaian group are now restoring it. You have, I understand, some fantastic beaches, right? Of course, if people want to go to fantastic beaches from the western side, they're going to drop into the Caribbean first, right? But I believe the artwork, the culture, the dancing, all of those things are there, and I use the word exploited now, not in a negative way, but to develop and showcase to people who want to come back. So Ghana can keep you busy for a 3-week trip to Ghana, where you have something to see each and every day.
You know, it's quite interesting. I've never looked at it like such, but then again, I live in it, so I think I have a whole lifetime to explore the country, and we don't do much of that. That said, there's a thing that I would like to, you know, in a bit of the research I did. You're a founder, you're a founding member of the advocacy group that's pushing for the decriminalization, legalization of medicinal cannabis and industrial cannabis. Share the story with us. How did that come about?
All right, so very quickly. About 105 years ago, ganja was made illegal in Jamaica, mainly by the British colonialists. People were using ganja as a health plant in Jamaica, making ointments, making balm, boiling tea. And that was the situation. When the Rastafari started to use it, it created concern, or there were concerns before, because the Rastafari were talking things that people couldn't believe, that God is a black man, that His Imperial Majesty is divine, that born the Queen, born the Pope, back to Africa. And let me tell you, you may laugh at this, but in the 60s and 70s, many people felt that Africa was one big jungle, right? I never felt that way, but I can remember landing in Luanda in 1981 and just amazed at Luanda. And I never had that view. When I came back, people asked me, and I said, no man, Rwanda is more developed than Kingston. And you know, they look at them, don't believe. I mean, today people understand that Africa is no longer a jungle. But in the 1950s, when Rastafari talking about back to Africa, they didn't start the back to Africa movement. It was there before them, but they brought it out more than other persons. And then they were fighting against the system. They called it Babylon, right? So people deduce that it must be the smoking of ganja. Only ganja could make people taught them kind of madness, right? Burn the queen, burn the pope, down with Rome, those kind of things. So they were seen as a fringe, but they were growing. They were growing both in their militancy and advocacy, etc., etc. So the first group, which we call the resistance group, there are some other individuals before, was the Rastafari. I belong to the reform group, right, which really came out more in the 90s when we started first for the legalization. We put so much pressure in the People's National Party, which was the government, that they did a commission on ganja. But it was political trickery. Although I was a member of the party in the leadership, it was total trickery, as we found out afterwards. What we call in Jamaica 649. Because that report came out in 2001 and they parked it. They just put it in a file and parked it. It was just to appease people that something else could happen. But we stepped it up in about 2012 again, when the PNP came back to power. We stepped up the advocacy. And there's, by that time, enough scientific evidence. We brought somebody called Josh Stanley to Jamaica, right? Somebody from Colorado who had developed the Charlotte's Web. And that had made the US FDA have to look at CBD because the evidence was overwhelming with epilepsy, that the US Surgeon General had to accept that cannabis had medicinal properties. And we were able to push with other groups. And we formed what we call the Ganja Future Growers and Producers Association. By February 2015, it was decriminalized. And very quickly, 5 things happened. 1, you could no longer have a criminal record for possession of small amounts of ganja, right? 2, all the people who had records, once you applied, your record was automatically expunged, meaning that there were thousands of young people in particular who were criminals in the society, could not get certain jobs, could not get visas, could not work in the security industry, could not join the police force, you name it, that a criminal record. So it was barring their progress in life. 3, all Jamaican adults were allowed to grow 5 plants and use it for their own therapeutic use. 4, Rastafari were allowed to use ganja as a sacrament, right? You could apply for these premises to be a sacramental place and you could use it. And you could carry ganja to the point, right? And finally, we opened a medicinal industry where you had to apply for your license. Big mistake was done. It was built top down.
Right.
Very difficult for the average traditional small farmer. The people who had built the industry, the people who had suffered by having their fields cut down and locked up, brutalized, often beaten, they were left out, right? And the government had changed. They wanted a kind of corporate type industry to sanitize it and to show the Americans and everybody else that this was something that was medicinal and is not for the average, like a small Joe to get involved. It is just now that the eyes of the government have opened because of the importation of ganja from Canada, which created an uproar. Because 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, nobody believed that you would import ganja from Canada. That the government has had to reset and look about now, how do they open the industry for the small farmers? I mean, they've been saying it for years, but I believe it's now about to happen.
in Ghana, there's been a lot of advocacy ongoing. But I mean, growing up, even before I discovered what Rastafari was or is, people who sported dreadlocks were looked upon funny. As recent as 2014, when I returned from England, I had dreadlocks. I had to cut it the next day because within one day, I had been disdained by my own so much that I thought I couldn't deal with this. Some of these stereotypes are often found, you know, and have found a place in our society because of the incidence of, you know, crime and violence. I mean, there is crime and violence everywhere in the world. But oftentimes in Ghana, we're afraid. We say, okay, well, if you look at what's happening in Jamaica, you know, there are gangs and there are things, and they're thinking, okay, if we decriminalized or even did industrial cannabis farming in Ghana or did medicinal cannabis, it could create a negative effect. What sort of framework have you employed in Jamaica to ensure that there's some sanity, that all these stereotypes and fears that people have is taken care of?
So let us be very plain and straight. There is still people who look down, not many, on Rastafari, but it's more economic. If you are professional and Rastafari, if you have money, if you are an artist, that is okay. But in many instances, for poor people, right, there's that contradiction still, that people look down on them. The kind of brutality that was unleashed against Rastafari by the police no longer exists. Police used to just beat people because they were dreadlocks, frame them with ganja, even when they never had ganja. I mean, there's a whole history of painful experiences that Rastafari went through, right? So that happened in Jamaica. But happily today, that is really at a minimal level. One or two incidents, and people are willing to hit out when it happens. I can understand because you'll have 100 people wearing dreadlocks and one commits a murder. And very few dreadlocks or Rastafari are involved in that type of criminality. But one does, and people assume is a Rastafari. Internationally, we know in Jamaica that you have dreadlocks different from Rasta, right? And we know you have Rasta that don't even have locks, right, in Jamaica. So that has confused many people internationally. But by and large, people who are Rastafari don't commit crimes, right? Not involved in violent crimes or any of those things. They believe that they need to be more dignified because of their beliefs. But I understand the problem. I understand the problem.
You know, I just think there's three things that maybe you would like to share with us based on your study of the industry globally, and then the examples you mentioned, Colorado, California,
Canada.
And then what you're doing in Canada, and then also what you're trying to do in Jamaica. If Ghana should go down that road, and I know we have had some bills before Parliament, it's not passed yet. There are lots of people who are pushing for this to be passed, even for just industrial, you know, cultivation. What are the learnings? And three things that maybe, you know, the
All right. We have not seen any evidence in any of these countries, Canada, Colorado, California, Jamaica, that liberalizing ganja has contributed to it. In fact, in Jamaica, the court systems are more effective because it's been clogged up with hundreds of ganja cases and fines. The relationship between young people and the police have improved. And I suppose I can tell you about that in Jamaica specifically, right? I know in Colorado, I saw years ago that the stats showed that there are no greater accidents about people smoking ganja, driving, etc., etc. Now, ganja can disorientate you. We have no doubt about that. High THC, distance, time, everything. particularly not used to it at the first time, right? So people have to be also responsible in the same way liquor and alcohol can disorientate you. There's no doubt about that. I believe that the most important thing we can do is as the science unravels, science that is indisputable, that is shared with Ghana for Ghana to do its own experimentation. And I'll give you one quick example. We have enough clear cases in Jamaica of cannabis and reduction of prostate cancer, right? We are about to do the scientific clinical trials with our Ministry of Health. We hope to start in a couple of months to do those trials. We are optimistic that when you do those trials, the results are going to be very positive, that it has a positive effect on either arresting it or reducing it or curing it. So if you had a PSA that wasn't escalated, let's say 50, could be more than that, and the government of Ghana, Ministry of Health, volunteers who don't want chemotherapy and radiation, start giving them this medicine under controlled situations. Because it's not smoking, it's dropping it under your tongue. And you do it whether it's 3 times a day, 5 times a day, depending on the dosage you require. And in 3 months' time, your Minister of Health tests that and see that your PSA was 50 or above and it's down to 20. And in 6 months, it's under 4. These are results that it's not America telling you, it's not Jamaica telling you. It's the science is there.
Evidence right before you.
And your doctor sees it. It must start a conversation. It must start a conversation that, look here, this is a disease that afflicts black people. It's affordable. It's accessible. Why are we not using it? Can't your doctors buy in, you know? Your scientists buy in. Your pharmacists buy in. And they start to lobby. It's one thing when Paul Burke, who is not a doctor, right? But when a doctor says, I have treated this patient, here was his results, these are his results now, that is science for you. And I think that is what is going to kill the ignorance, the superstition, and really open people's mind that this plant has tremendous health and medicinal properties.
Well, I think that we probably should have the great cannabis debate in this country and put the science to the test. But away from that, let's talk a little bit about politics. I mean, you were the PNP's nominated Commissioner of Elections, I think between 2013.
Okay. I was one of 2.
One of 2, okay.
Yeah, both political parties, major political parties, are allowed to select, right, the leaders of both political parties and name them. So I was General Secretary of the People's National Party at the time and was named by the then Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller. More fairly good electoral system because although the independent members are the majority, there's agreement on about 95% of what we do, right? And really has removed the violence and the suspicion of the electoral system. Okay. The problem right now is big money, which has contaminated and corrupted the electoral system, where many people are willing to take our money and vote for a candidate and a party. And that is a major menace. Before it was a padding of votes and maybe the stealing of boxes, that has disappeared completely. And it is a real problem. And it confronts a party like the PNP, which traditionally doesn't have the support as much as the GLP from big business. So the kind of money we get is less. Some people in the PNP, unfortunately, a minority, would like to go that route. But our political philosophy for the main is against buying of votes. But it happens. It happens in our internal elections. I'm ashamed to say it happens, right? And there are some PNP people who believe that the way to win votes, with particularly the young people, who are not concerned about anything else but getting something now, is to pay money and buy a vote. That is not a part of the PNP's organizing strategy.
Okay.
It has not been central, but some people felt had we adopted that in 2016, right, we would have won the election. Right?
But then at what cost? Because if people only have to get paid to vote, then you have even greater problems down the line, because illicit funding can make its way into funding your politics. And I don't want to mention some examples that are not too far from the Caribbean.
Yeah. No, drug money has influenced elections in the past.
Okay.
Some people don't even know they're getting drug money, right? They think it's somebody who they owe a favor to, etc., etc. But big money is in politics. First of all, how much you can advertise, the kind of campaigns you can do, how much money you can spend with voters. And that is part of the problem when you don't have state financing. And then people are going to say, why should we pay for this? But if you don't, the money is going to be found from another source. And that is the problem. It is confronting us seriously in Jamaica. So the electoral system, the infrastructure, is a very fair, open, transparent one. But the interaction with voters, that's a completely different thing.
True. We have similar problems here in Ghana. Hopefully we can learn a thing or two from Jamaica.
I watched your primaries with great interest.
Any parallels and lessons?
No, the primaries are very good,
Okay.
right? It's a good concept to try and arrive at your popular candidates who people think they are best, etc., etc. So it has that. I saw a number of incumbents not winning, and I saw some people unopposed. But it brings far more good than bad, right? And I think you have, in terms of what happened, there is a great unity, right, of the NDC in terms of 90% of the vote. I think the argument is over as to who should be the leader, right? And I think most people accept the candidates because it has been open, it has been transparent, it has been fair. And of course, money always influences, regardless.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think finally, you studied our electoral, you've watched us with some keen interest. If you look at the Jamaican democratic system and the Ghanaian system, are there any parallels, are there any examples or reform ideas that maybe you're considering for in Jamaica, or you may have done recently that we probably could learn?
Well, I've always liked primaries, but that like has been reinforced since coming to Ghana. There are a lot of parallels between us in the 70s and the 80s. Those in the political system in terms of ideology, right? It's a bad word for many people, but every party has an ideology, regardless, right? The whole purpose of politics, it is in whose interest does the economy serve. That is all politics about, in whose interest the economy serves. And who is the fundamental constituent you have to look about. Is it big business? Because it's hard to serve big business and hard to serve the vulnerable at the same time. You have to do both, because business is what fuels the economy. But politics is about in whose interests we serve.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, it's been great talking to you and an honor being in your presence and learning a few things. I wish the rest of your stay in Ghana will go well, and we look forward to having you back here soon.
It has been a pleasure being in Ghana, and I want to thank you for the opportunity of this interview.
Well, we've been talking to Mr. Paul Burke. He is an entrepreneur, politician, and advocate, an all-around nice guy. And there's a lot of parallels between Jamaica and Ghana, not only in our heritage, but more importantly in exploring opportunities that will help grow both our economies through trade, through tourism, through cultural exchange, and more importantly, the hemp. This is the Sassy Breakfast Show. Stay on for more.